recognizable snippet of music is the very beginning of Spring from Antonio Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. Today we're going to be talking all about the violin. And as some of you may know, I have been playing the violin for most of my life now, and there's always something new to learn about music. So we're going to be talking about the early history of the violin and some of the differences between the Baroque period and modern violins of today. Now, as you can probably guess, violins have been around for centuries. But just how long, you may ask? Well, the first depictions of violins date back to 1530 in northern Italy. That's partly why I chose to play a piece by Vivaldi, because he was an Italian composer. Now, these first violins were not very uniform at all. There were different sizes, and there wasn't a standard for how they were made. And they also were typically only played in small ensembles, not the big orchestras or fancy solos that there are now. As time went on, a bit more of a standard for violin making was developed, and the instruments began looking and sounding a lot more like each other. Now, roughly from 1600 to 1750 was a period of music called the Baroque era, and that is most of what we're going to be talking about in the old violins. This is the time when the violin started to be used as a solo instrument, and some of the most famous composers in the entire world are from this time period, including Italian composers Corelli, Claudio Monteverdi, and as mentioned earlier, Antonio Vivaldi. Some of the most famous German Baroque composers may sound a bit more familiar to you, so I'm going to mention a few of those as well. Johann Pachelbel, George Frederick Handel, and most famous of all in the Baroque era, Johann Sebastian Bach. All of these composers have composed countless amounts of violin repertoire that is still studied and performed all around the world today. Even though the violins of the Baroque era were more uniform, they still had a very long way to go to get to the modern violin we know and love today. Baroque violins and bows were different in a variety of ways, some of which you can't really tell upon first glance, so that's why we're going through some of them right now. One of the ways the violins is different is that modern violins have a more angled neck, which supports the higher tension needed for the strings. The strings themselves are also different. In the Baroque era, there were only gut strings, and while you can still purchase those, they're more commonly steel or synthetic with nylon. These changes help to support the modern, slightly higher tuning of the instrument. Baroque violins were often tuned where A equals 415 hertz, whereas today's violins are tuned where A equals 440 to 442 hertz, depending on where you are in the world and the orchestra you're playing in. And the strings were still called by the same names, G, D, A, and E. They just sound slightly higher now. The fingerboard, which is this part where your fingers play, in the Baroque era, that was slightly shorter because Baroque music didn't typically go to crazy high pitches like later music does. And the bridge, which is this little piece of wood here, used to be slightly flatter, which made playing double stops, which is two notes at once, a little bit easier, and chords. The biggest change that time has had regarding the violin is actually on the bow. The bow is what is used to actually make sound on the violin. It does that with horsehair, which is what the strings on the bow are. It's actually horsehair. And you put rosin, which is this stuff, on the bow. And the rosin is made out of tree resin, and it makes the horsehair sticky, so it actually sticks to the strings to make them vibrate, to make sound on the violin. There are different types of rosin for different climates and for different types of playing. In general, rosin hasn't changed much, but it is an important aspect to know, considering that's how the sound is made on this instrument. Baroque bows were actually shorter than modern bows and were curved outward instead of inward, kind of like this is. Baroque bows were very, very, very light at the tip. Modern bows are still light at the tip, but not to the extent that Baroque bows were. And I'll show you just a little example of that right now. So since the bottom is heavier, if I just pull across the strings without changing the weight at all with my hand, at the bottom it's a lot more crunchy, and at the top the sound basically disappears. And that was even more drastic in the Baroque era. All of these slight differences in the violin and bow are what gave Baroque music its very distinct sound. And when you listen to Baroque music, it's very easy to tell what is Baroque music and what is classical or romantic or modern music. And just so you can really hear the difference, I'm going to play some clips of the same piece by Bach, played on a modern violin and historically accurate on a Baroque violin. I just gave you a lot of facts about the violin. I hope it wasn't too boring for you. Just to summarize, we went over a little bit of the early history of the violin, some differences between Baroque and modern violins, and some differences between Baroque and modern bows. I really encourage you to go listen to the rest of the Bach piece on both videos, and I hope you gained at least a little bit more appreciation for this lovely instrument. To close, I'm going to play another piece, a little bit of another piece that you might recognize, which is Boccherini's Minuet, and he was also a famous Italian composer.